Today's episode of the podcast is brought to you by Eccentric, the makers of the K-Box and the new K-Pulley. Guys, flywheel training's really grown in popularity of late, and although it's something that's been around for a while, the simple reason that it's grown in popularity is because it works. We've been lucky to have a K-Box in our weight room for the past 3 years, and we've seen some really great things when it comes to improving the athlete's ability to change direction, and then looking at our return to play protocols with different lower body injuries with the student athletes. The love-hate relationship that everyone has with the K-Box is now just going to grow more with the addition of the K-Pulley. The ability to do standing presses, pulls, rip-throughs, and knee drive exercises is just going to be another arsenal to our training and another addition to the love-hate relationship that our student athletes have with the awesome tools that come from Eccentric. Go ahead and hop over to eccentric.com today to check out what they have. Guys, I can't recommend it enough, and I guarantee you won't be disappointed, not just with the products, but with the awesome customer service that Eccentric provides. Hey everybody, if you enjoy the podcast and the content it provides, be sure to hop over and check out the community. The community is an exclusive members website that is just an extension of what we do here in July at the Central Virginia Sport Performance Seminar. What it is a combination of video lectures, a coach's corner with your Monday morning take-home information, and a forum where you can talk about anything and everything related to the field of strength and conditioning. In the community, you'll find content added each month from some of the top practitioners in the world, ranging from PhDs to high-level coaches, bringing you exactly what they're doing with their athletes or their research at the present moment. On top of that, an additional discussion by coaches bringing you that Monday morning information, things that you can add to your training program right away. Tying that in with the opportunity to discuss with coaches around the world in the forum on anything and everything from the topics addressed in these presentations to whatever you're seeing in your daily life as a coach. If this sounds like the right thing for you and your staff, go ahead and hop over to cvasps.com/community and try it out for 48 hours for just $1. If you like it, you're signed up, ready to roll, and you're jumping into all the great content added each month. If not, feel free to go ahead and cancel at any time. No questions asked. We're really excited about what we're building in the community and hope you are too. Go ahead and hop over to cvasps.com/community and check it out today. Hello and welcome to the podcast. Today, guys, I have the absolute pleasure of sitting down and talking FRC with Utah State's Joey Bergles. Guys, Joey's going to dive right into it, getting into the meat and potatoes of everything that goes on with FRC and how they're using it down at Utah State, including how they're evaluating their athletes, how they're implementing it, how they're putting it in both globally as a team view, and then for each individual player they have out there on the football team. This is a really awesome talk, guys. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did. Let's get right to it. Joey, thank you so much for taking the time to be with us today.
Hey, awesome, man. Glad to be on.
Yeah, so listen, let's just give everybody the quick rundown, Spark Notes, Cliff Notes version of how you got out there to, out in Utah and what you're doing and everything you guys got going on out there.
For sure. So I started after college. I interned for a year at a small NAI school in Central Florida. It's called Weber International University. Mm-hmm. When I was there, one of the assistants had been a GA at Utah State. So that was kind of the first time I'd ever heard about Utah State. He was only there for a couple months, and then a full-time job opened up at Utah State, so he left. And then, so kind of fast-forwarding, after that year, I GA'd for 2 years at a Division II school in St. Louis called Lindenwood University. When I was finishing up there, that coach that had left to come back to Utah State, he was taking another job at a private high school in Pittsburgh. And basically said that, he was recommending me for the job. I was finishing GAing, so I needed a job. So that's kind of how things fell in the line, and I've been here a little over 3 years. So that was kind of how I got in at Utah State here.
That's awesome, man. It's great how those connections can pay dividends. And, a mutual friend of ours, Cam Davidson, said that you guys are doing some pretty interesting stuff with the FRC down there with the football team. And now, I guess let's start out with a two-part question with that. What is it? Because you see a lot of it, and it kind of just looks gymnasticsy. And how do you get because you guys don't have young men. You guys have grown men that are football players to buy in and get into that.
Yeah. So basically, kind of what FRC is, it's a it's a systematic approach to improving mobility, and basically the way to kind of define mobility, or the way they define it, the way that I've kind of come to define it, is active range of motion. So what you neurologically can control actively. So you think a good example I give people is if you pull, like, do a high knee pull or pull your knee to your chest, you can probably pull it up pretty high or whatever. But then can you actively do that same thing? And most people can't come anywhere close. Like, you might be able to pull your knee past your, midline, past your belly button. But if I asked you to, with good, just using basically your hip flexors to be able to pull your knee up, most people couldn't come anywhere close to that. So that's kind of the difference between flexibility and mobility. So flexibility is what you can achieve passively, kind of without neurological input. Mobility is what you can actively kind of control. So that's kind of knowing that, and that kind of builds off kind of everything that you do, or that we work towards, of being able to, first of all, if you don't have passive range of motion, that's the first thing that we need to improve. So if you only have, like, say, 45 degrees of straight leg flexion, your hamstrings are tight, or however you want to look at it, that's the first thing that we need to do. So if you don't have very much range of motion, you're going to be able to probably neurologically control it. But the more range of motion that you have, that's where you see a lot of people like people that, I don't want to generalize, but like yoga or people like that can control these huge ranges of motion. But can they actively control, if I can take my hamstring all the way back here, can I neurologically fire it all the way back here? And chances are they're probably only going to be able to fire it right here. They have all this range of motion right here that they can't neurologically control. And there's a reasoning why for that. So that's kind of one of the premise of the system. So getting, for us, I should say, from an athletic population of the gymnastic stuff and stuff that you see, that's kind of where, and it's tough, and like that's kind of where you look at, like, oh man, I wish our guys could do that or whatever. People that, rock climbers, gymnasts, ballerinas that live in those extreme ranges of motion, even like Brazilian jiu-jitsu players, MMA, that live in these, that's what they do. When you look at football, basketball, baseball, a lot of these other sports, well, baseball, pitchers, you're going to be living in extreme external rotation, so that's kind of a bad example. But you look at a lot of these sports, you probably don't necessarily need to be able to get to those ranges of motion. And the same kind of concept, it's, you don't just wake up one day and I want to bench 405, and 6 weeks later I bench 405. You know what I mean? It's kind of the same thing when you look at like mobility and things like that. If you have someone that can't move at all, you're not talking about, weeks or months. Like, if you really want to get someone to that extreme range, that's like years and years and years. We don't have that amount of time to work for it, and you have to work on building strength, muscle mass, speed, all your other metabolic work, all those different factors. So it's kind of with the FRC stuff for us of getting guys to move better. If they can move better, it's going to affect our ability to gain strength and gain muscle, put on muscle mass. Because a good example is, if you don't have good ankle dorsiflexion, or you can't move your ankle very far, you're not going to be able to squat very well, squat very deep, Olympic style. So you're going to have trouble putting on muscle mass, strength, however you want to look at it, onto your quads. And I think you see that a lot with, probably basketball players, for example, that have really bad ankles. And a lot of times, yeah, they have long femurs and things like that, but they're not able to really load up the quad like that. So that's kind of one of the premises. We want to be able to Olympic squat. Not everyone's going to be able to Olympic squat. Everyone's going to have limitations. We want a majority of our guys to be able to get a good Olympic, butt down to the floor squat. Because if they can do that, the quads are under a tremendous amount of stretch. We're putting a tremendous amount of load on the quads. That's going to help the quads grow. It's going to help them get stronger. That's going to help them put on muscle mass. So when we get these guys that come in that need to develop, that's kind of one of the reasons why we want to squat that way. So if a guy needs to put on 30, 40 pounds, that's kind of the big thing for us. But if their ankles can't work, we're going to have a lot of problems. And I think we've seen really good results, and probably other people have too. If you get people that come in that can't move very well, that they're going to have a problem putting on strength, putting on muscle to a certain degree. If you get someone that comes in that might be really weak, but they can bend well, they can move well over 3, 4, 5 years, you're going to have a lot better success utilizing a lot of different strength training techniques, loading methods and things like that to get them stronger, bigger, and things like that. So with the FRC, it kind of works into our whole overall philosophy of being able to move good, being able to stay healthy. So if you're hurt, it doesn't matter if you can squat 500 pounds. If you're only playing 3 games a year, it doesn't really help us. So being able to keep guys on the field, keep them moving good, but then also be able to, from like I said, a strength training standpoint, putting on the muscle mass. Even, you look at it from an acceleration standpoint. If you can't get your knee out over your toe or you can't dorsiflex well, you're not going to be able to accelerate as well as you could because your angles aren't going to be very well. Same as like cutting, changing direction. So it's kind of a holistic philosophy for us. So the stuff that we do, we're trying to get guys better. We're probably not working towards that end range, the kind of the cool stuff that you might see online of, oh man, that looks awesome or whatever. Like that's years and years and years away, and you're probably not spending a whole lot of time, 4 or 5 days a week lifting, doing all the other things that we have to focus on when we're working with athletes.
So how do you evaluate what needs to work on where, and then how do you progress through things?
So we do one of the parts of the FRC system. It's called FRA, which stands for Functional Range Assessment. So we do that on all of our football guys. So basically, it's a joint by joint assessment of going from your big toe to your ankle to your hip, shoulder, spine, neck, all the different joints within your body, looking at active and passive ranges of motion. So we do that on all of our guys, and that gives us an individual kind of structure to work with of what we need to focus on. And then the stuff that we do in lifting or as part of our program, we also give them their own individual mobility or the stuff that they need to work on their own that we push consistently 10, 15 minutes, 4 or 5 nights a week to get them better. With that said, you could probably generalize for 90 to 95% of people, a couple of big areas that most people need to work on. And that's kind of what we look at with that. So you're looking at hip internal rotation, shoulder internal rotation, hip external rotation. Those are kind of I would say the big 3 for the most part. And then the ankles, and then other areas that might be a problem. So like for us, with football or something like that, we've been doing a lot of shoulder abduction work in addition to our other shoulder stuff. So when you look at not just injuries and performance, all kind of goes together, but guys, defensive guys, they have to make a one-arm tackle when you're all the way back here, which is what shoulder abduction is. So if I'm a linebacker and I'm kind of tied up and I have to try and make a tackle right here, if my shoulder can't move very well right here, I'm either not going to make the tackle or something's going to pop right here, or there could be an issue. So like when we're going through training camp right now and even into July, we were kind of working more so on that stuff, where if you asked us what we're doing in January and February, it's going to be different because we're 6-7 months away from playing. It's different, like kind of the same way you periodize lifting. Maybe you're focusing on more developing more muscle mass in January and February in the off season compared to June and July. You're doing a lot more sprint work. You're doing a lot more change of direction work. It's kind of the same stuff with that. So like we're working a lot more on like ankle inversion, eversion right now in training camp, and then July, just because from an ankle sprain standpoint, all the cuts, the change of directions that guys are making now in season and training camp, it's a lot different than what they're doing in January and February. And we're so limited on time. I mean, as you know how it is, that you can't, there's obviously probably 100 things we'd like to focus on, but you kind of have to try and prioritize what your biggest bang for your buck is at that time. So that's kind of, how we individualize stuff and prioritize stuff. And then we do a lot of the stuff in the warm up, I guess you would say. And that's probably one of the biggest areas I would say that's changed a lot for us is how we approach our warm ups and how we're doing that stuff. So like I said, your biggest areas that most people are going to struggle with, hip internal rotation for sure. So that's something that we've been working on a ton, pretty much every day when we do a warm up. And we've seen really, really good results with doing a lot of that stuff in the warm up, which yes, it's preparing them for what they're doing that day, but it's also kind of from a long-term perspective that we want to get that stuff in. And it's an area that if you just ask someone to internally rotate their hip, you see a ton of compensations. That's kind of one of the things that we've noticed of whether using their lower back, using something else, which isn't hip internal rotation. You should be able to, your femur should be able to move basically within the acetabulum of your hip. So you should be able to rotate like this. It shouldn't be where your pelvis is going with your hip when you're internally rotating. That's one of the areas that we've had to spend time doing it. And guys, from the buy-in standpoint, guys have seen a lot of progress. And guys, like you walk through our locker room before practice, yes, we're telling some guys to do stuff and we have a plan pre-practice what we're doing, but you see a bunch of guys doing their shoulder stuff, their hip stuff, whatever, and their neck stuff or whatever, and we're not telling them to do it. So from a buy-in standpoint, like guys are seeing like, wow, my hip, maybe it's been hurting me for kind of 3 years. We've been doing this stuff and my hip feels better. Or like one of our offensive linemen who had horrible hip internal rotation, like 1 degree. So 1 degree is you barely move it at all and there's a restriction. absolutely horrible. After a couple months of, focusing on this stuff, doing it on his own, I retested him, and he was at like 10 or 12, which still isn't great, but it's a huge, huge improvement. And he'd had chronic knee problems, and you kind of talking to him like, yeah, my knees don't hurt anymore, whatever. It's like, wow, because your hip can actually move now. So now maybe instead of creating some movement through your knee or kind of that area, that you're actually able to get it through your hip. So that's kind of where, from a buy-in standpoint of, we coach it hard just like we would coach lifting or anything else, and we focus on it, we prioritize it, and then guys are kind of seeing the benefits of, wow, my shoulder doesn't move or it hurts or I can't do this, and then trying to, with that, make them understand how it applies to their sport. So if you're a defensive back and you can't internally rotate your hip, if I'm backpedaling and I have to turn and run, someone's running a 9 route and I got to open up, if my hip can't internally rotate, my step is probably going to be a little bit less. So I have to take another step to get back to where I'm in a straight line. So we can technically get you faster coming in and out of your breaks just by getting your hip to open up a little bit more. So explaining that to them in that concept, and every defensive back or any skill guy, I want to run faster. Well, here's a way that can help you run faster. We're not doing any plyos. We're not doing any speed work specifically for that. So that's kind of trying to help them relate to what they actually do and movements they do in their sport, where it's like, wow, this can help me or this can make me faster.
So you run this test on like 100 guys?
Yeah. Yeah. And the actual test, we do a modified version of it. The actual test will probably, because it's really in depth and it takes a while, it's probably going to run you 30 to 40 minutes per guy. We do a modified version of that where we cut out some of the stuff just because, like I said, when you're working with that many guys, it takes forever. We cut it down to where it's about like 10 minutes a guy. So it was literally like 3 days when we were taking everybody through 3 days, pretty much 8 hours a day going through it. Now we only do that maybe once or twice a year. But the nice thing about it is, if I tell you that you need to work on hip internal rotation, I know what your hip internal rotation is. It's in your program. It's really easy. And I do it all the time during workouts or before workouts after. Hey, lie down on your back, because you can't cheat it unless I'm doing a bad test or whatever. You can't cheat, like your whatever that is. So when I look at it, like, oh, wow, man, this is like a lot better. You've been doing your stuff? Yeah, I've been doing your stuff. I can tell. Or you get some people down, have you been doing your stuff? Like, no, you haven't, because this looks the exact same as it did 6 weeks ago, type of thing. You know what I mean? So that's kind of the nice thing about it, is that we run the gamut of the assessment, but we'll break it down, or we can just do it individually. If a guy has a shoulder or wrist, that's the other thing too. Guys coming off like a wrist surgery or another thing, that might be in their assessment, but it's not in somebody else's assessment. So like if someone's had a knee, like an ACL or any type of knee surgery, we'll look at knee extension. So even though you might have had your surgery a year ago, does your knee fully lock out? Does it extend? Whereas we're not gonna do that for everybody, because like I said, that's just gonna keep taking time and time and time. And when you're working with that many people, it's tough to try and limit the time. So
since, obviously everybody's going to be different, but there are going to be some commonalities across the board, whether it be positionally or sport or whatever. When you're implementing this pre-practice, are there like levels, or is it like everybody basically does like the key movements and then you just go from there?
So kind of within the system, there's different, I guess, methods or things that you'll do. So probably from a pre-practice standpoint, one of the big things that we do, they're called CARs, which stands for controlled articular rotations. So basically what it is, it's whatever the joint you're working is, challenging it to go through its full range of motion, whatever that might be. So can you see me very well right now? So I can do a shoulder CAR right now. So I'm going through every motion of the shoulder. So I'm into flexion, I'm internally rotating while I'm coming back. I'm going back into extension, but I'm still internally rotating, and I'm coming down to my side. So I'm going back into extension, I'm still internally rotating. I'm doing a bad job. I'm probably compensating right now. I'm coming all the way up. So all the motion's coming through my shoulder right now, and I'm coming back down. So that's every motion that the shoulder can do. And if you think about it as a circle, we're trying to expand each little inch that I can get into flexion without compensating with my lower back or whatever. So that's a lot of what we do from a pre-practice standpoint: shoulders, ankles, hips, neck, thoracic spine. If someone has wrist problems, we'll do wrists, elbows, tibial rotation. So like I said, every joint in the body should be able to move in some capacity. So, I mean, people can do toe cars, big toe cars. Most people can't even move their big toe. I can't move my big toe very well, so that's not one, whatever, but that gives you an idea of kind of a good example of that. I can move my finger, this one, I can move this one, I can move them all because I use my hands all the time. You should be able to move each individual toe by itself. Now, I can't do it. 99% of people can't do it because we're in shoes all day and we don't have to use fine motor skills, but that's a trained quality that you can have. There's no reason why I have to move my big toe and my little toe together. Same way I don't have to I can move this finger and I can move this finger, but I don't have to move all of them together. So that's kind of the relationship that the nervous system has. There's no tissue limitation there. It's a neurological, basically we're untrained. And that's kind of a little off topic, but that's kind of where, you see babies, they can all full squat. You know what I mean? As we get older, we don't train those ranges of motion. So the nervous system basically takes away those ranges of motion from us. It's not necessarily that my tissues are physically short. It's that if I don't use a range of motion, my nervous system will and it relates back to neuroplasticity. If I don't use that range of motion, my body's going to try and conserve as much energy as possible, that it's going to take it away. So that's why you get someone that can full squat as a baby. They sit in a chair all day or they sit at a desk all day for the next 30, 40 years. And they can't squat below, or they can't even get close to parallel, or they can't squat below parallel. It's not necessarily because of a tissue thing, it's because the nervous system has just lost that ability. So you have to retrain it and regrain it. So that's why, especially for like youth athletes or younger athletes, that's why personally I feel that training through a full range of motion is so important. And you look at a lot of Olympic weightlifters that started when they were really, really young and maybe don't even train anymore, but I've seen a lot of them that can still have phenomenal mobility and don't even work it anymore because they've been doing it for such a long time and they kept that ability that they don't even have to train it anymore. They can still pop down into a full squat. So that's kind of, I know that was kind of off topic, but that's kind of how the nervous system works. And it relates to the FRC system of improving the joint's capacity to be able to move. But then it's also when you look at the neurological firing. So like I said, if I can move back here, but I don't have much strength right here, I might be mobile, but I'm not very strong. And that's kind of where, when you look at it from an injury mitigation or however you want to look at it standpoint of mobility is important and strength are important. So I don't think you can really generalize and say one's more important than the other because they both work hand in hand, if that makes sense. Mm-hmm. Like if I'm really strong in a box, this little area, that's really good. And I'll probably be fine right here. But as soon as I said, like that example, if I can't move my arm back here and I can't fire it very well, that's probably going to be a shoulder problem waiting to happen. Mm-hmm. Or if I get hit there or whatever. And that's where, when you look at the extreme ranges of motion, that's where a lot of the injuries and stuff happen. So like if you sprain an ankle, you roll an ankle, you get out of a position where you have no strength or your tissues aren't used to being, and then the ligament or something gets strained, teared, torn, whatever. So that's where you could be really strong in a short box, but if you expand your box, that's good. But if you don't have any strength out here, so that's like where I was saying, like the yoga example or whatever, that we're trying to build strength through that full range of motion. So.
No, I love it, man. And it's funny that the people that do these classes and implement this really speak highly of it, but it's something that still is really kind of like underground Fight Clubby almost,
Yeah.
So where can people go to find out more about this? Because it is intriguing.
Yeah. So the best place is probably Instagram, because there's a bunch of people that are posting a bunch of really good stuff. So if you look at, they've got like their own official pages. So it's functional range conditioning, and then it's called Kinstretch, which is basically like a group. It's FRC in a sense, but it's done in a group setting. That's where a lot of really, really good information is posted. The other thing too is taking a class is really obviously probably the best way. But then if you could find because it's still a relatively new kind of system, as it's been expanding, there's more, I guess you would call it, practitioners that are coming up across the country and kind of across the world. That's how we got introduced to it at first. One of our athletes had been doing it with somebody else, was telling us about it. We were kind of seeing it online and didn't really know what it was about. We found someone in our area. It was a chiropractor that had taken a couple of the classes. This athlete spoke really highly of him. We set up a consultation with him, and that was last May. And it was kind of, we walked away and it was kind of like, oh, wow, like this is phenomenal. You know what I mean? It was like 2 hours. And it's like, wow, we just learned stuff that we've never even heard of before. Like, and we started doing it and we were doing it. And it's like, wow, I've never felt like this before. So that was kind of our introduction for it. So that would be the other really good thing I would say is try and find someone around in your area or wherever you can and get them to actually show it. Cause it's tough sometimes to watch a video or see something online and not really, maybe do it correctly or understand kind of a lot of it's built around tension too. So you might see a movement. So I could do a movement like this, whatever, or I could do a movement where I'm squeezing up as hard as I can. That's giving me a different change. So this and doing this, where I'm getting maximal tension coming into shoulder flexion, that's sending a different signal into my shoulder capsule. So that's maybe something that you can't maybe pick up online in a video, but if you have someone that can show you that or coach you that or whatever, you're going to pick up on that stuff better. So that would kind of be the areas that I would look at.
Well, and obviously you're just getting a snapshot online too, so you don't know what they did before or after or in the middle.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, man. I love it. Dude, Joey, I can't thank you enough for spending some time with us today. Now, you put a bunch of this stuff out on your socials, too, so let's make sure we drop your Instagram in here so people get you a follow on that, too, because you do put some cool stuff, especially the stuff like, what was it, last Friday or Thursday, where you put, like, the guys actually doing it in the warm-up. I think that the warm-up...
Was it the upper body one?
Yeah.
Yeah. So the one where they were up like this, and they're doing that shoulder or the elbow extension with shoulder extension.
Yep. And then there was one just a few days ago, the ankle where they were doing where they were on all fours, or well, they weren't quite on all fours, but yeah.
Yeah.
No, like awesome stuff. So what's that handle so people can make sure they follow you out there?
Joey, Joey, Bergles, Bergles.
Awesome, man. Joey, can't thank you enough for spending the time with us today, bro. This is killer. Thank you so much.
I appreciate it. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, man. Cheers. We'll be in touch real soon.
All right. Take it easy.
See ya. And a huge thanks to Joey Bergles for spending the time with us today. Guys, you just can't thank the man enough. Make sure you give him a follow, JoeyBergles on the Instagram. He does. He puts out some really cool stuff, and I've been watching it, trying to figure out what they're doing, and it's really driving me to want to check out one of these classes. So, Joey, can't thank you enough for all your sharing and your open and honest sharing with us today. And guys, as always, if you did enjoy the talk, please share it through the social media outlet of your choice, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, whatever it may be. If you know someone that could take something from this talk, shoot it to them in the DMs. Go ahead, tag them on Twitter, whatever it is. Again, we are just trying to get the best information out to all the great coaches out there. And as always, guys, thank you for everything that you do for us here at Central Virginia Sport Performance. We will be back next week with another awesome guest. We will see you then.